Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Technoscience Thursday at 2 webinar. My name is Julie Hinderer. I am the Science Programs Manager at the Great Lakes Fishery Commission in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'm leading this project along with my co-leads, Andrew Muir, Steve Cook, and Nathan Young. Um, just a few tech tips here. Appreciate if you would mute your audio when you're not speaking. You can do that using the microphone icon down on the bottom taskbar. And during the question and discussion period, you can ask a question or make a comment in one of two ways. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand using the React icon on the taskbar. You can click on that, and there is a raise hand option. And then you can also drop questions or comments in the chat, and we will be monitoring the chat as well. So since this is our first webinar, I wanted to briefly provide a little bit of background into how this webinar series came to be. This project was developed by the Great Lakes Fishery Commission Science Transfer Program, which seeks to identify fishery management needs in the Great Lakes and make information more accessible for decision making to meet those needs. And the program really emphasizes two-way knowledge exchange. And so we really try to involve knowledge producers and knowledge users in developing our projects and developing our products. And because we're interested in sort of having folks from the management and research side involved, I wanted to do a quick poll to kind of get a sense for what people's different roles are who are on today. So I'm going to launch this poll. It's anonymous, optional, but if you could fill it out really quick, I'm going to launch this and give folks about 30 seconds to fill it out. So hopefully this works. Are folks seeing the poll? Oh, I see results coming in, so it's working. Okay, responses are slowing down a little bit. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So hopefully you're seeing the results here. I can see we have pretty strong representation from researchers, fishery biologists, and a few fishery managers, technicians, technologists as well. So really pleased to see kind of a range of folks, and hopefully we can have some good knowledge exchange here. So moving on. So typically in the science transfer program, we go pretty in depth on one topic. We produce things like workshops, decision support tools, other products like fact sheets. But these technoscience webinars can kind of be considered mini science transfer in the sense that we're only spending an hour on a topic. But if we identify a technology or a topic that warrants more focused knowledge exchange efforts, then a more in-depth follow-on project could be pursued. And Ted dropped the program link in the chat, so I encourage you to check that out. And you can also get to it from the QR code on the slide. Okay, I'm trying to advance the slide, and I have all these all these little Zoom windows. Okay, here we go. So what exactly do we mean when we say technoscience? So our definition comes from this paper by Steve Cook et al. And this paper actually inspired this webinar series. So the authors define technoscience as the dynamic triad between technology, science, and society. And so with this series of webinars, we really want to explore how to integrate these technologies into management and understand the barriers and challenges to doing so, which are often social or institutional, not necessarily technological or scientific. So I encourage everyone to check out this paper using the QR code, or Ted is dropping a link in the chat. And one of the barriers to adoption of technoscience that the paper identifies is that there's a huge number of tools available and development of new technology is happening really rapidly. So this makes it difficult for managers to keep abreast of the technoscience and really for anybody to keep up. So to address this barrier, this webinar series seeks to provide an overview of technoscience development in a quick and accessible manner. And in addition to providing information, we hope to build a community of practice to support two-way knowledge exchange around the application of these technologies. So this webinar series is a kind of a pilot project. So we're going to be looking to you, our audience, to provide feedback on whether this is useful, how we could improve, and whether we should continue the series beyond its original run. So as such, we will be using polls within Zoom and occasional surveys via email to collect feedback, and I'd really appreciate your participation in those. For this pilot series, we're going to hold 6 webinars approximately monthly during 2025 on Thursdays at 2 p.m. The recordings will go up on the Fishery Commission's YouTube channel at Lamprey Control. And you can also find links to past webinar recordings and information on upcoming webinars at our webpage, which you can access using the QR code on the left or the link that Ted is dropping in chat. And next month, we do have a webinar lined up for Thursday, February 13th. The topic is real-time observing systems. We have speakers lined up from the Real-Time Aquatic Ecosystem Observation Network and from the Great Lakes Observing System for that webinar. And then future webinars past February, we'll probably have to skip March, but we're hoping to do webinars in April, May, June, and July. We don't have dates yet, so to make sure that you don't miss an announcement about a webinar, please do sign up for the listserv. You can sign up using the QR code there on the right-hand side, or Ted will also drop a link in the chat. And there's also a link to register for the second webinar directly. Okay. Finally, I want to introduce this concept of technology readiness levels as a potentially useful tool for our discussions during this series. This framework was developed by the military and was recently adapted for natural resource management by Cup et al. In Fisheries magazine. So technologies are assigned a level from 1 to 9 on a spectrum from basic research to successful management application. And this type of framework can give our community of practice a common language when discussing technoscience advancements. So I encourage you to check out this paper at the QR code or at the link in the chat. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And pleased to introduce our first speaker. So Dr. Xiaobo Tan is an MSU Research Foundation professor and the Richard M. Hong Endowed Chair in Electrical and Computer Engineering at Michigan State University. So take it away, Dr. Tan.
Thank you very much, Julie, for the kind introduction and for your invitation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And thanks to everybody for tuning in this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about some of the work we have done on using autonomous service vehicles for acoustic telemetry. So I'm trying to minimize Julie's video here, but okay, I'm going to hiding you at the corner. All right, so acoustic telemetry, I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with.
Xiaobo, we're not seeing your slides.
Oh, I have not shared my screen, I guess. I'm sorry. All right.
There we go.
Sorry about that. So acoustic telemetry basically is you put an acoustic tag inside a fish and then release the fish. From that point on, you track their presence through receivers, right? Basically acoustic receivers. Existing work mostly utilizes stationary receivers, basically deployed and then wait for months or even years and then retrieve the data. To understand basically the fish movement. This process is quite labor intensive during the deployment and the retrieval. It has limited cover range, of course. It depends on how many and where you have deployed these receivers. So this is the sort of a map I downloaded a while back from GLaDOS website. GLaDOS is the Great Lakes Acoustic Telemetry System, the system there. So it has pretty good coverage overall, but still, how much you can cover depends on how many and where you have deployed the receivers. As I mentioned, in most cases, you are not getting data in real time, right? So you deploy and you have to retrieve uh, data one way or the other, but that usually there's a delay from days to weeks to months, depends. Also, the resolution of fish localization is limited. In most cases, you're basically looking at so-called proximity, right, or vicinity of the receivers, because you cannot tell where exactly the fish is when it's detected, because depending on the range of detection, could it be 10 meters, could it be over a kilometer there. So really, it's hard to tell by just using these individual receivers. So that has motivated people to use robots for so-called mobile telemetry, where you have receivers mounted on different types of underwater robots. So this is a picture from Rayon. I think they're they're going to be talking about their work at the next webinar. I think that's that's what I heard earlier. So this is a slocum glider. Basically, it's very energy efficient that utilizes gravity buoyancy to travel. Uh, this is a wave glider, which has a surface float, and then you also have the sub that actually kind of harvests energy from the wave. Again, it's very energy efficient. And then you have these autonomous underwater vehicles that are propeller driven, not particularly known for energy efficiency, but there's pretty good speed. And then these sail drones utilize wind energy and solar to travel, and stay in operation for a long time. So these are all great advanced platforms for basically tracking aquatic animals using acoustics, but they have limitations in the sense that, or constraints. And in particular, all these vehicles are very expensive. You're looking at price tag of 200 grand US dollars or above. Some of these can go well beyond $1 million. And also they require special expertise to operate and maintain. So these are fairly delicate machines. It's not like very straightforward to operate. So you need really well-trained technicians and researchers to manage them. They also not suitable for a lot of environments in the Great Lakes areas. They are typically used for oceans. Great Lakes are in some cases like big like oceans, so that's fine. But there are also a lot of smaller lakes or rivers, ponds. These vehicles will not be very effective. So partly motivated by that, in my group, we have looked at some particular robot we call gliding robotic fish that is sort of a hybrid of robotic fish and underwater glider, just like slocum glider, but it's a much smaller version of it, and it's not meant to really dive into deep sea, right? So it's for many lakes in the Great Lakes region. So if you just wait a second, you will see that it actually flaps the tail swimming at this point. And next second, you will see it's just like gliding, right? There's no movement you can observe from outside. It's just like underwater glider. And if you look down the belly here, there's an acoustic receiver mounted. And there are a few other pieces of equipment. You can see the blue light. This is actually an algae sensor. And we also have temperature sensor, dissolved oxygen sensor mounted just to kind of monitor the water quality and other parameters. So this is a very cool platform, and we actually have tested for acoustic telemetry in Higgins Lake many times. So this is one of the trials, and we looked at whether the receiver mounted on this platform will be able to pick up acoustic tags, and if so, whether it can do it effectively. Right. So we did a lot of studies on how the locomotion, the poses and speeds and things like that will affect detection efficiency. So I'm not going to bother you with all the detailed numbers here, but the overall message is it actually is pretty uh, basically feasible to do it in terms of the detection performance. And it actually has detection for most of its operation time. So because it's very quiet most of the time. But it still requires special expertise, right? So it's actually requires deep special expertise, and it is underwater robot. Because of that, of course, there's advantage being underwater, but the disadvantage when you try to use it is there are two things that you cannot easily access. One is its location. GPS signals do not penetrate water. The other one is wireless communication. Right? So similarly, our signals cannot penetrate water. So you really have difficult time trying to communicate with these robots when they're underwater. And so that is why we started to look into autonomous surface vehicle, or ASV, uh, basically robotic boats. And this is one of the vehicles we have developed. We call Chase, just a acronym here. Uh, it's kind of catamaran type of like pontoon vehicle, and with this is basically some high density foam underneath to get enough buoyancy, and you have a Pelican box containing all the electronics. There is a winch, you can have it, or if you don't want to have it, that's fine too, but it allows you to lower whatever sensor or receiver to the desired depth. This robot is very kind of simple. It has essentially one thruster, and that's sitting under a servo motor. So basically, you can vector the thrust so that the robot can turn, can steer to go to different locations. So what are the good things here? I mean, especially for today's talk, it's very cost effective. If we don't count the labor to put this thing together, the cost of everything uh, basically be around $1,000. Okay, I put kind of more conservative number like $2,000, but it probably is I thought around $1,000 if we do not consider the acoustic receiver. So in other words, if you have the money to buy one receiver, you definitely have the money. You have the money to buy all the materials for putting together this robot. The other thing is it's very kind of lightweight and compact. You can see its size, with respect to people. Unlike some of the robots I showed earlier, they are typically much bigger and heavier, oftentimes require a crane to deploy and retrieve. In this case, you can just one person will be able to do it. Because it's on the surface, so GPS signals and wireless communication signals are readily available. So that makes things very easy to handle. Also, there are a lot of resources out there, such as open source software. Like they're basically control software people have used for controlling drones and other robots that can be easily accessed for developing the technology. So here I'm going to show a very quick video of how this robot fared on the lake. This is Hammond Bay on Lake Huron. So it is able to handle wild waves pretty well. And we went on to do several rounds of experiments, mostly to understand how this robot will perform when trying to detect acoustic tags. So rough sketch of the experiment is as follows. So we have some tag sort of deployed at some place, and then this robot will carry acoustic receiver with a tether, and you can adjust the length of tether so that the acoustic receiver is at different depth. So we basically ran the robot along different trajectories, and we also deployed stationary receivers just to compare the detection performance once we get data back. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the curves, but rough messages here are, this has been published last year, and actually the year before, on animal biotelemetry. And these curves showing the detection probability or efficiency versus the distance, right? So the detection probability is like, how many times you actually detect the acoustic transmission versus how many times how many total number of transmissions the tag has sent. So the blue curve is the USV when it is drifting. So when drifting means actually we kind of get to a certain point and you turn off the throttle and you listen. And this is when you actually do not turn off the throttle. You try to maintain your location. We call station keeping. And this is the stationary receiver performance. As you can see, okay, these two are just two different signals detections from two different tags. One is high power, one is low power. Uh, so you can see the yellow curve and the blue curve are relatively sort of they're close, right? So in some sense, they're pretty comparable, but the green is not. And furthermore, we also discovered that it is not very good in terms of detection when the robot is cruising, like meaning the proper thruster is on and trying to get to somewhere, and during that time, it's not very effective. So this you can consider as a deficiency or a sort of challenge. When you actually run the propeller, looks like it has some interference with the detection, which although we have not got to the bottom of the problem, but it sounds like this is a one observation that was true. So then how are you going to use it, right? So what we think you can use it is you can still let the robot navigate to different spots or areas, and then you shut off the engine, not engine, the thruster, and then let the receiver do its work, and then you pack up and go to the next spot or waypoint. So since then we have done a few more things. One thing that we were interested in doing is okay, how we should sort of deploy the robot, let's say, in a given area to maximize your detection probability, right? So this is more an engineering question than directly a fishery question, but ultimately it will help out the operation there, right? So if you have limited time to work on the water for the robot, and how are you going to maximize its efficiency? So along the way, we also discovered a potential new approach for basically localizing or better localizing the tag, because once you have a range detection probability, like uh, how your basically receiver is picking up detections at different distances. If you know that characteristic, then based upon your detection kind of statistics, you actually can better localize the tag than just knowing its so-called proximity. Because when we say proximity, you really don't know exactly where it is. But so this allows you to further pinpoint the location of that tag. So here's some simulation plot. I'm not going to get into the detail, but if you look at the green process versus the red stars, these are sort of the estimated and true kind of tag locations of when you use this approach. So you can see that get you to the order of 50 meters or 100 meters versus maybe hundreds of meters otherwise. So we have done field experiments to support this concept. We're actually working on a manuscript to summarize these findings. Another thing that we are working on, thankfully, we just got a new Great Lakes Fishery Commission grant to look at basically a network of these vehicles to work together. The advantage, number one, of course, it will enlarge your survey area for a given time of operation. So you can speed up the surveys process. A second thing is it allows the collaboration between these vehicles to do fine positioning instead of just, a rough estimate. You can potentially be very accurate. So here is a very quick sketch of this. So if you have a fish that's tagged, right? So it's sending out pins, and then if you imagine that goes to a network of these robots on the surface, and these robots can also exchange timing of the detections that form so-called time difference of arrival. And that information will allow you to triangulate and get a much better estimate of the position of this tagged fish. And then you can use that information to actually follow individual fish, kind of maybe with resolution of 5 meters, 10 meters. And therefore, its actual continuous time trajectory. So that's the idea. And that we believe is going to help answer a lot of interesting fishery questions. So I hope I have not taken too much of your time here. So the basic takeaways in this sort of exploration is one is we really there was a need, there is still a need from fisheries science and management in terms of having advanced management tools or research tools going beyond just data from stationary receivers, right? So we take that kind of as an unmet need to look at several technologies. In particular, this technology has shown promise in meeting the need because of its cost effectiveness and it's lightweight, and of course, it's easy to communicate with, and a few other advantages as we mentioned earlier. Also want to comment on this virtual cycle between science and technology development, because this is sort of the theme of this Technoscience webinar series. In this case, we really have kind of worked across different disciplines on our team. Basically, mostly we are engineers and we work with folks from USGS, and they are very knowledgeable about the particular domain. So that kind of interactions has really kind of made our engineering kind of effort more relevant towards what the community needs. And during the process, we also advanced engineering disciplines in terms of some of how you can better essentially localize the tag and how can you actually have these robots collaborate. So there's a lot of interesting theory totally from sort of engineering side. And at the end of the day, we want this going back to the fishery sector to help everyone to advance the practice in your fishery research, and hopefully one day will be used to facilitate the management as well. So I was asked to comment on where this technology stands at this point. So this was the slide showing earlier by Julie, and here is our robot. At this point, I think we are at 5 or 6, somewhere there, because it has been tested in relevant environment with particular application in mind. It has shown promise, but it's not quite ready in terms of management or extensive research yet. So that's where we're moving towards in the next couple of years. So hopefully we can finish level 7, and after that, I guess we'll see the end of the tunnel for management. So given that, some of you may ask, how or when can I get one in my hand, right? So I'm going to just throw out a few ideas. I would welcome more your thoughts and ideas during discussion later. So first thing that, I feel that we should demystify, because if we want everybody, I mean, I literally say every one of you there, to be able to feel comfortable having one and be able to use one. The first thing is to demystify the technology, right? So we have conducted one successful workshop last year. This is 2024 GLaDOS meeting, where we actually introduced this robot, including how we construct it or how you might construct it, and how do you get software, different components. We still have all the resources online that people can access, and we got a good crowd from different, just like today, from different sectors, and people really contributed a lot of discussion. So I think these kinds of workshops will be helpful. And the second thing is really sort of grassroots kind of organization, the people who are interested in this technology, being from university, from the science side, from the management side, of technicians and alike. We can come together and we can have discussions. You could have your boat purchased commercially, like this is a blue boat from Blue Robotics, right? But they're not ready for acoustic telemetry studies or tracking whatever other, quality aquatic environmental quality kind of applications already. So it makes sense for people to come together and discuss, share thoughts, experiences, how you make things work. And ultimately, with all that kind of development, I feel some more coordinated effort, maybe from Great Lakes Fisher Commission and other agencies, to have some supportive program. Because at that point, if you think about now, if you uh, just like you want to buy something and you go to Amazon, you download the app, and that thing will work, right? So similar idea, maybe in a couple of years, you can have, or we can have some of these platforms ready for rental, and you just need to download the app, and you can go in and do your work, right? So that's sort of uh, very high level idea. Well, so that's pretty much for my talk. I want to thank all my students and staff for really contributing to this work. In particular, Eric has done quite a bit of work for the ASV work I discussed today. I also want to acknowledge great collaboration from folks down USGS and GLaDOS. In particular, I want to acknowledge Chris Holbrook, who actually came to my office over a decade ago talking about this collaboration. So this has been going very strong over the years. And also quite a few staff members from HBBS for running our boat during our testing. And also acknowledgement of funding support from different agencies, and in particular, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. And I really like to hear back from you guys in terms of any ideas or thoughts on the talk, and in general, the idea of let's kind of work together and get the boat to the hand of everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xiaobo. Great talk. There's a couple of questions in the chat. What I would like to do though is move on and have Pete get started. Xiaobo, do you feel comfortable answering those questions in the chat?
I
Or
will look through them, and I will try.
okay. And we should have time after Pete's talk for questions for both Pete and Xiaobo. So hold on to those questions and we will get to them. Okay, so it looks like Pete is sharing. So our next speaker is Dr. Pete Esselman. He's a research fishery biologist at the United States Geological Survey, Great Lakes Science Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Take it away, Pete.
Okay, Julie, can you hear me all right?
Yes, but I'm seeing your Zoom screen.
Yep, I'm getting
Okay.
there right now.
Okay,
How's that?
that's perfect.
Very good, thanks. Thank you, Julie, very much, and the Fishery Commission for the invitation to present today. I'm a research fishery biologist at the USGS Great Lakes Science Center, and work a lot on Lake Huron on the large vessel program, but also work a lot with emerging technologies and drones in particular. I really like this image for setting the stage here, both because it illustrates the vast extent of the Great Lakes on the curvature of the Earth, which is one of the primary challenges of fisheries assessment in these systems and really doing science in these systems in general. And it also illustrates the power of remote sensing for gaining new knowledge about ecosystems, whether they be terrestrial or aquatic ecosystems. In this case, if we look at this picture, we can sort of infer that Lake Erie has a different color and different productivity gradient. We can see shallow areas, we can see ice, we can see some land cover patterns. So remote sensing is essentially the science of obtaining information about objects or areas, or I'd argue organisms from a distance. Typically, we think about that in the context of satellite or airplanes or quadcopters and different aerial drones. But I think it's appropriate to think about on the water and in the water remote sensing, or sensing of the environment as remote sensing as well. Terrestrial remote sensing from satellites and airplanes really revolutionized the way that land management takes place. On the left side here, you can see sort of a, very brightly colored land cover map that probably has reasonably high spatial resolution. These have been generated, since the 70s when Landsat was launched, and they've really just exploded the potential for terrestrial land management, forest management, and many other things. And to the point where today we're flying small drones with super high resolution sensors on them to facilitate precision agriculture, precision applications of nutrients and waters and weeding and interventions based on local environmental characteristics. Remote sensing scientists for a long time have been thinking about how we can apply these above the water satellites and airplane sensors to aquatic ecosystems. This is one sort of conceptualization of how different components of an aquatic ecosystem might be conceived in terms of the time frame and the spatial resolution at which processes and patterns present themselves. And you can see along the bottom many different potential remote sensing satellites and sensor suites that are up in the air to facilitate the detection of these things in water. And in fact, the Great Lakes have been the beneficiary of some of these things. If you go to NOAA's Coast Watch site, you can find lake color interpreted products about chlorophyll and ice and other factors. If you go to the NOAA's lake level viewer, you can find 3-meter LiDAR elevations from airborne LiDAR. I would argue that that remote sensing techniques have a lot of ability to assist with fisheries assessment directly, and a lot of the patterns and spatial resolution component of that would be happening in the far left side of the spatial resolution gradient, where fish is maybe the size of a round goby, 40 to 120 millimeters, or the size of a lake trout, maybe up to 1.2 meters for a giant one. You know, this is sort of the scale at which, or the resolution at which we should be sort of concerning ourselves with remote sensing of biological organisms, however, over massive spatial extents. So today I'll be exploring or providing very high level exposure to how aquatic drones that operate on the water and under the water can be used to remotely sense fish and fish populations in the context of fisheries assessment. And I'll be highlighting specifically 3 classes of underwater drones, including several mentioned by Xiaobo in the last 20 minutes, including uncrewed surface vehicles, also called autonomous surface vehicles, long-range autonomous underwater vehicles, and then short-range autonomous underwater vehicles. And this is not a comprehensive survey of these technologies, but rather one that's practically grounded in work that the USGS has been leading for the last 5 or 6 years with real examples to Great Lakes fisheries assessment. So uncrewed surface vehicles are really remotely monitored and commanded boats that are powered by a variety of sources, including wind, wave power, which was the wave glider that Xiaobo mentioned, which you can see in the upper right. Electric vehicles such as this Sea-Track. This is a vehicle that NOAA owned and operated for a few seasons recently. And then on the bottom right, you even have diesel-powered uncrewed surface vehicles. This is a boat that the Great Lakes Research Center of Michigan Tech is running on loan from Ocean Xfinity, which is a big global ocean exploration company. USGS has been leasing these sail drones, which are 21-foot long, 15-foot high, wind-powered surface vehicles with really high persistence. The advantages of USVs are that they have really good spatial positioning. They tend to have high persistence from a week up to months. They can carry large payloads typically that require a lot of power. And there is some risk associated with their operation on the water. But the barriers to working with the U.S. Coast Guard and the Canadian Coast Guard to operate these on the Great Lakes are not particularly great. With regard to fisheries assessment, we've been working with Saildrone Corporation, which basically rents their drone as a data service. So the way that you access sail drones is by paying them a per day, per drone fee. They have a minimum volume that they've been able to flex on a little bit for our pilot work in the Great Lakes. But you can see since 2021 that we've deployed these extensively on the 4 of the 5 Great Lakes, Ontario being not particularly focused around hydroacoustic data. So these drones have enough power to run conventional fisheries echo sounders, which we have, which Saildrone has integrated onto the keel of the sailboat and has gimbaled so that at least in the roll dimension of the vehicle attitude, it's basically always oriented in a downward direction. On this map, you can also see all these red dots, which are places where USGS and our many partners have taken their conventional fisheries research vessels with hydroacoustics and met up with the Saildrone and collected direct one-to-one, same water, same night comparison data to essentially ask the question, how well does Saildrone data compare to conventional vessel data? Does noise production by conventional vessels affect fish distributions and fish abundances detected with acoustics? In the inset here is a 2024 mission that we did with 2 drones over 45 days, covering the entirety of Lake Superior. So as with any conventional fisheries echo sounder, we're collecting raw echo sounder data that look like this. The red area here is the lake bed. This the max depth here is 260 meters. The surface is up here, and we're seeing beautiful patterns in our data like this, the day to night transition in mysis distributions, which are these sort of small speckled areas. And these larger red dots here represent fishes that are tracking those that mysis layer. We've been essentially mining these types of data, filtering them, and distilling different fisheries distribution and abundance quantities from them that are typically used in fisheries assessment. And when we compare the conventional vessels at all those red dot comparison sites to sail drones, we're finding for 4 different endpoints, which include the amount of total scattering energy in the water, which relates to biomass, the target depth of the individual fish that are detected, the strength of targets, which is related to the fish size and their body orientation. If they're fleeing, their target strength might drop. And then we have the ratio of density on a log 10 scale here. Essentially, the middle line of these charts at 0 represents no difference between conventional vessels and sail drone. And for lakes Michigan and Huron shown here in 2 different years, we are essentially seeing no appreciable difference in any of these metrics, no statistically significant differences to speak of. In other words, Saildrone is indexing the vessels and vice versa, and therefore can be kind of a force multiplier for fisheries assessment, especially for detection of fish biomass and density using acoustic sensors. In Lake Superior, there's a 10% difference in detected biomass and density. That's approximate, averaged over many sites and many vessels. So in Lake Superior, there's a slight difference biased towards Saildrone, which suggests there might be a little bit of avoidance happening. It's consistent across all the vessels that were used, which spanned a whole range of noise production profiles. So just to summarize a little bit here of some of the major sort of, I guess, advantages and disadvantages. We're getting really, really good signal to noise ratios from the drones when they're properly tested. We've had issues where there was electrical interference with the acoustic sensor, which led to degradation in our signal and essentially sort of hid some of the deeper fish from us. In terms of logistical ease of deployment, the data as a service model of Saildrone is very convenient. They basically take on the burden of engineering, all the risk, and they have a very straightforward user interface that allows for very easy mission planning. The Coast Guard coordination has been very straightforward with just a local notice to mariners. We've had vigilance 24/7, and so do they at Saildrone. The cost of this is about $4,000 per day after you account for travel costs, getting the vehicles out here and back. To purchase some of those other USVs, the capital costs can be extremely high. for us, the sail drone's been a pretty good solution, and it's well scaled to the Great Lakes. If you do acquire these things, you have a new burden of workforce demands. And for technical readiness, we see this as a very well-proven technology. It just hasn't made the bridge into our regular management here in the Great Lakes, but it has a lot of potential to do that, particularly in conjunction with vessel-based sampling to catch fish to attribute to the acoustically detected biomass, which is not species specific. Moving on to long-range autonomous underwater vehicles. Autonomous underwater vehicles are essentially vehicles that you pre-program along a given track. They'll take a surface position. They have onboard sensors for their heading and depth and speed over bottom. And there's either dead reckoned navigation underwater once they lose GPS position to the assumed location of the next waypoint. Or in some cases, you can install really fancy gyroscopes on these things, and they can essentially account for deviation due to currents. The long-range component of this refers to vehicles that have very much higher endurances and as a result, ranges. For instance, on the bottom left, we've worked with Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute with these long-range autonomous underwater vehicles. These can go out for 7 to 11 days or so per charge. These are electric powered. This is Rayon's glider, which can go out for over a month. And then this is a 1,600 pound AUV that NOAA's been using that has a bunch of different sensors on it called a Saab Sabertooth. Here in the Great Lakes, we've used the Mbari Tethys vehicle with up and down looking fisheries acoustics on it. We're flying this in the middle of the water column and looking up and down. And one of our main purposes is to really understand how much fish biomass are we missing near the water surface when we're doing down looking sonar from conventional vessels. Our initial results, these are results that Hannah Blair at Cornell has been producing, show that a large proportion of fish density can occur in the top 5 meters of the water in Lake Superior, and a lower portion in Lake Michigan on average, but still reasonably high at some locations. And so, we're sort of beginning to use these types of tools to assess what the water column in a more complete way that includes young of year fish that are distributed near the water surface. Like the sail drone, we can get very high signal to noise with acoustic instruments on board with these things. It also offers capabilities for mobile telemetry. We've been sampling environmental DNA with these to see if we can apportion fish relative abundance to the acoustically detected targets. And you can do all sorts of fancy adaptive sampling. Like if you detect high density of plankton, then you sample more intensively. The logistical ease is not so great with these. There's basically 24/7 vigilance with active vigilance. It's not very passive. The launch can be somewhat arduous. These tend to be 400 or more pounds. Mission planning is still reasonably straightforward. I've been able to train some bachelor's level individuals how to do this with reasonable efficiency. They can be quite expensive. That Saab Sabertooth is close to $3 million. The Tethys vehicle is now being sold by Saab at close to $1 million. Again, technical readiness on all this is quite high. So for autonomous underwater vehicles are the same as long-range ones, except these tend to be deployed for hours rather than days. These are, again, pre-programmed and given routes. These are lower cost for entry, and they're a lot more sort of user-friendly in general. And you can put different payloads on them. We've been operating the one on the lower left now for about 5 years and have had good luck. You can see where we've deployed this. They tend to be coastal deployments. We can operate it to 200 meters. We've been using it to image the lake bed and do lots of quantifying of lake bed characteristics, including round goby. We have an automated AI-driven process for detecting round gobies with reasonably high efficiency and also attributing size and density to them. And with the density information, we can use swept area methods to estimate lake-wide abundances, which you can see in the solid lines for the red in Lake Huron and the blue in Lake Michigan are much higher than the bottom trawl estimated abundance in the dashed lines at the bottom. These have an added advantage of simultaneously being able to characterize substrate. We have a paper going to publication for Dreissena density estimation. We can do submerged aquatic vegetation estimation and some really sub-millimeter 3D reconstruction to the extent that that's useful for things like detecting interstitial volumes for fish eggs in spawning grounds and questions like that. So data quality can be really high if the water's clear, which the water tends to be clear in most of the Great Lakes right now, thanks to, in part, to Dreissena. Side scan data can be really nice too because you can fly at a set altitude, and you can mount mobile water quality sondes and do good observations. These are really easy to use. If you have some fancy gyroscopes, you can kind of let it go and come back 5 hours later and pick it up within 10 meters of where you released it. If you don't have that, you kind of have to babysit it a little bit because it needs to come to the surface to get GPS. Cost of entry on these is a lot cheaper. And just normal, your normal bachelor's level biological technician can operate this. The whole AI question opens up a whole new area of technology and cost. So I'm not going to get into that. And these are at a high technical readiness level again. So to summarize, marine autonomy has reached high technical readiness in general, with trends towards higher persistence and swarming and under ice capabilities. The Great Lakes are really good proving grounds for these technologies and well scaled to marine technologies. So these things are really a good fit here. And the data that they collect is excellent, and especially when it's doing things that we could never do with a vessel previously. Some fisheries applications are well supported with this. Some aren't. When you need a fish in hand, this is not the way to go. So for acoustic fisheries assessment, we still need to go out and trawl to figure out which part of the acoustically detected biomass is what species. The cost of entry is a major barrier, like Xiaobo had suggested. This tends to limit these capabilities to larger institutions. But those institutions are somewhat numerous within the region and I think are generally amenable to partnership. CSMI seems like a low-hanging fruit for getting fleets of vehicles out in different lakes on a 5-year recurrence interval. AI could be its whole own technology seminar series. Maybe that's a good one for the future. And then data management, I think, is an interesting topic. So I'll go ahead and finish up here and just acknowledge many, many, many collaborators on this work. And especially thanks to my direct collaborators at Michigan Tech and Cornell, and to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and the USGS Ecosystems Mission Area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Great talk. Yeah, so we have a few minutes to open up questions for Pete or Xiaobo. So feel free to drop questions in the chat or raise your hands. Let's give people a minute because I've got back pocket questions. So
I can ask Xiaobo a question while people are getting ready.
Go ahead, Pete.
Then maybe you could ask me one, Xiaobo. You said that the RoboFish, I'm going to call it that for lack of a better term,
Sure.
is a low cost vehicle. How much are the pontoon style vehicles to produce?
All the cost of materials or parts, electronics, probably around, I would say, $1,000 or $1,500. That is not, I mean, acoustic receiver can cost easily $1,500 or higher. So, but I'm not counting the cost of labor to put that together. So that depends on how skillful the person is.
Thank you.
Ted?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Just as somebody who boats on the Great Lakes and has been out after dark, what, like you said, it was pretty easy to coordinate with the Coast Guards of Canada and the US. Have you had much trouble with, boats that maybe don't have radar, that kind of thing, running into any of these things, or is it a threat or something you have to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we haven't had issues. The sail drone is really it's very bright during the day, and it
Yeah.
also has AIS, so the
Okay.
large vessels can see it. And then at night, it has a really bright mast light, which actually has been problematic from a mysis standpoint. So we've
Mhm.
had to actually shield that to so that mysis aren't avoiding the water surface while we're surveying. But we've done that successfully. NOAA did have a problem with one of their autonomous surface vehicles, the Sea Track, where a unattentive pleasure boater ran it over, and that was a costly mistake for NOAA or for the boater. And those things can happen. Um, the Coast Guard has been really fabulous about working together on this, and they've been surprisingly easy to work with compared to like aerial drones, which have all sorts of regulatory sort of red tape associated with them.
Okay. Xiaobo, is there, yours is a lot lower profile. Do you have to put any markings on it or lights if it operates at night or?
So we have not tested during night conditions,
Okay.
but imagine if it's into the hands of people actually going to use them day and night, even during days. That yeah, you should have put it, make it noticeable by
Yeah.
boaters and other traffic.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple questions coming in the chat. I understand that this mostly is focusing on autonomous vehicles, but has there been much work on remote operated underwater drones in the Great Lakes?
Pete, that's for you.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think I think Narini is referring to tethered vehicles, remote operated vehicles, where you have an operator on deck with like a joystick type controller. There's a lot of those. In fact, that's a much lower barrier for entry from a cost perspective and from an operations perspective. And if where you maybe had to use drop cameras and a scuba diver in the past to get good information about the underwater environment, you can essentially put those over the edge. You can acquire one for really Blue ROV has like a pretty capable entry level one for about $3,000 or $5,000. They can get up much more expensive than that. If you really want the fancy ones, go to like Northwest Michigan College. But yes, there's a lot of work going on, and I intentionally sort of avoided that here because it's so common, and this is a little bit more cutting edge, some of these fully autonomous capabilities.
Thanks, Pete. Next question is also for Pete. For the underwater vehicles, can you briefly break down the advantages and disadvantages for each of the models?
Hmm. Uh, well, Ivor. So Ivor 3 is the an L3 Harris product that we've been using, and it's very common. It's been on the market for a long time. It has a pretty good tech support, and the cost entry is not terrible. There are some more sort of interesting, sort of emerging AUVs that are like 3D printed. They can come in at a lower cost. Riptide makes one of those. Xiaobo is one of those. Some of those are micro AUVs or micro UUVs that are sort of meant more for swarming. For us, I picked the Ivor because it's proven technology that has nice expandability and sort of an open. They have a good API that allows us to interface with the software of the robot in a way that's pretty convenient. And so we customized a camera on that platform for those reasons. It'd be a more extensive discussion to talk about all of them that are out there, Warren, but I'd be happy to talk about that one-on-one.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question that's here in the chat from Matt Faust. So, how have the research teams working with these vehicles dealt with non-boat related obstacles present in some Great Lakes, such as commercial fishing gear like trap nets or gill nets?
Yeah. again, I think Xiaobo, if you're okay, I'll take that one because we've deployed so extensively. So when we're using a long range autonomous vehicles, we tend to interface with the local departments of natural resources that are tracking net deployments and commercial fishing activity. And we also reach out to local tribal entities and try to respectfully secure their permission to work within their tribal waters, and also to scope out whether there's net deployments in those areas. When we're working with short range vehicles, we tend to go out along our track and sort of scope it out and look for the buoys that would indicate trap net or gill net deployments. We have been captured in a gill net twice now with the Gobi bot, and it's never fun. But in both cases, we were able to recover it and compensate the owner of the net for their lost equipment.
Yeah, Xiaobo, any comments at all on that, or?
No, we have not gone that advanced in terms of deployment. So thankfully, we have been able to avoid, I guess, these problems in the first place. But we'll see down the road.
Great. Okay, well, we have to wrap up now. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but let's give our speakers a big hand. Thank you so much to Xiaobo and Pete. Thanks everyone for joining, and hopefully we'll see you on February 13th.